After 9 years of sleep deprivation and hard work, Yugi's mind began to unravel, and he started to descend into madness until he jumped to hug a truck, ending his life at that moment. His soul was transported to a different world, but when a slime appeared beside him, it began leading him deep into the forest. He followed it for hours until they reached a mysterious hut filled with hundreds of magic books, among which was the Royal Grimoire of Destruction. But when he noticed hundreds of slimes gathering at his feet, the royal system was activated, taming them all instantly to become his companions. They began jumping around the room, searching for all the mysterious grimoires, and within seconds, he gained thousands of skills through their eyes and earned the title of Sage. The slime started calling him Yugi, making him realize that, for the first time in his life, he had a name. And a week had passed since then, and he entered the Magic Academy to learn about their world. But he broke the royal orb when it appraised his mana level. Even during a test of his fire magic strength, the teacher wondered how he cast a spell without an incantation. So Yugi apologized for forgetting to use it and went on to say the words "fireball" before burning a rock to smithereens. On his way to the Adventurers Guild, a creature appeared, asking for his help, saying she needed to collect all the dragon mushrooms in the forest. Although he knew there was only one reason someone would want to collect such a large quantity of mushrooms, the slime began collecting all the mushrooms in the forest until she finally had all the ingredients to create her medicines. She summoned a bed of flowers and swore she would serve him for the rest of her life. On his way home, when he used a slime to scout the forest, a bomb exploded while Yugi was dodging a goblin trying to kill him. However, he summoned his slimes to throw the goblin down and left the area, unaware that a demonic stone was summoning them. After returning to the Adventurers Guild, the receptionist asked if he was abandoning his quest, and all the hunters were disgusted by having a weak tamer among them, especially this one. However, Yugi ordered the slimes to release all the flowers, but when the guild master asked how he got enough flowers for 2 years, a scout shouted that a horde of monsters was invading the forest. At the same time, the slimes he released last night revealed that thousands of goblins were heading towards the guild, chanting Yugi's name, so he ordered everyone to evacuate. But while the soldiers vowed to sacrifice their lives to protect their families, Yugi revealed he had a way to save them all. He extracted a huge dragon bone from inside a slime's throat, revealing he could use these remains to recreate a flame and wipe out the entire goblin army. However, all the soldiers thought that taming useless slimes would lead them to their deaths, but the bald man realized something was off with Yugi's slimes and told everyone to give Yugi a chance, saying they would be under his command. So, while they began securing the guild's borders, Yugi climbed to the top of the building. As the hunters threw aerial bombs, archers launched a barrage of blades into the ground, but the goblins kept appearing. So, Yugi shoved the dragon bone into his slime's throat, having lied about his power all along. At that moment, he activated the king's system, analyzing his skills to save the city while erasing all the goblins. But the creature from the forest saw a mysterious man holding a magic stone in the forest. So when Yugi told his slimes they were good, the fools realized they were about to be sacrificed. But they jumped through a dimensional gate, where the guild employee realized something was off with Yugi. At that moment, the slimes manifested above the man, so Yugi transferred his mana to restrain the mage while activating barriers to nullify the stone's magic. But a spell forced the man to bite his tongue. At the same time, the resistance was fading, so Yugi ordered his slimes to help him, while he transferred his magic to launch fireballs that burned the goblins. But the city was already being invaded. The only way to save them was to activate the blazing fire of demise. Yugi realized this, but after seeing that it would also destroy the city, he decided to release a magic barrier to protect the soldiers from its explosion. While Lily thought he was amazing, he told her to stop hiding and evacuate the hunters from the front lines. As soon as he ordered the slimes to create a perimeter around the city, the creature from the forest entered through her dimensional gate. The slimes surrounded the city. However, one of the goblins broke through the barriers, but when Ale tried to stab it, Harry lunged to push the monster back, yet it remained unharmed by all their attacks. As they were about to die, the legendary Fenrir bit the Goblin King and pulled the hunters into the city. At that moment, Yugi activated his barrier around the entire city, and they wondered who could cast a royal-level spell of this magnitude. The adventurers quickly wondered how Yugi cast such a powerful spell, as it would have destroyed anyone else's body, but Lily looked at him, wishing it would destroy hers. However, some goblins survived the explosion, and Yugi began to fall to his knees, his health depleted from draining his mana points. But he ordered the slimes to prepare for another round. While the barrier was cast, he activated the blazing fire of demise again, burning the entire field to eliminate the remaining goblins. But after casting the spell, his body collapsed to the ground. By the time he regained consciousness, he saw all the slimes waiting for him, along with Lily, while the adventurers found the magic stone lanterns, realizing the prophecy had begun. While Yugi drank the drink Lily prepared, she revealed she had kept his secret from all the adventurers but wondered why he was hiding his powers. However, he decided not to say anything, so she began to leave, wishing him a good night's sleep. His old life was nothing but misery and exploitation, so he was happy that for the first time he could use his life to save others instead of wasting it. So he began walking into the forest at night, but he kept a slime to investigate the lantern, because when the guildmaster revealed that the demise of Central City would come soon, Yugi realized that this was their next destination. They arrived at the capital of the world a week later, but a dragon noticed his aura, and 3 men gathered to eliminate Yugi during the blue moon within the city. All the slimes wished they could eat, making him realize they hadn't eaten anything for a full week, but he noticed everyone was staring at them. However, he saw Gupta's butcher shop, so Yugi decided to buy the entire store to feed his slimes. A few hours later, they entered the guild, and Rock spoke poorly, saying a slime tamer was too weak to join their guild. But when she saw he possessed tracking abilities, she immediately accepted him, as it was one of the rarest abilities. At that moment, a man who looked like Dracula asked if he wanted to join their team, and Tina continued to introduce herself along with Lisa, noting he was hiding something longer than her spear. However, Yugi revealed this would be his first time on a team, but Lisa didn't care, as she believed his monster tracking skills would save their lives. After all, she thought he was better than Vladimir because all his teams mysteriously disappeared, but Yugi remembered the same way his colleagues in his old life argued, and he hated them for it. As they walked together through the forest, he remembered their plan to find the Earth Dragon's lair, but he realized something was off with their team. Suddenly, Vladimir started running until 4 wolves surrounded them, and the girls wondered why he led them towards the wolves instead of avoiding them. However, Yugi realized there was a 5th one above them, but while he tried to use magic, Vladimir cut down the monster to tell them he would handle it while he moved between the wolves, dodging their attacks. Nevertheless, Yugi wondered why Vladimir intentionally left the wolves alive and why they were playing, but he decided to follow his story to find out. When night fell, Yugi realized that Vladimir had led them on a different path, but Vladimir claimed that going off-road was the best way to avoid robbers. However, he told them to sleep first because he would take watch at night. At 3 a.m., the slimes alerted Yugi that Vladimir had fled during his shift, revealing that both Tina and Lisa had also disappeared. As Vladimir continued running, he realized something was watching him. He realized Tina and Lisa were on the other side of the trees, and Tina revealed she became suspicious when Vladimir offered to take the night watch. However, when Lisa thought they should ask Yugi for help, Tina said he was weak. But Vladimir started walking towards them with his weapon and fired his weapon at one of Yugi's slimes. But even though he thought he had killed the spy, he saw his weapon was empty, as CDA barely managed to hide its presence, and was afraid these were its last days. But Yugi revealed he granted it immortality to save its life. As Vladimir started to flee, the girls began to follow him, but they noticed the traps Vladimir had set until Vladimir reached the hut where the 3 men had met the previous night. When Old Man Miles asked what Vladimir had collected, he revealed he had collected 2 girls along with his target, and was planning to say they died against hordes of goblins, just as he did with all his other groups. However, he had already known the girls were following him, but Miles saw it as the perfect opportunity and began to choke one of his men, telling the failed victim that the night of sacrifice had come. The 2 girls realized they needed to escape, but when they stumbled upon one of the traps, Vladimir saw them, and they realized their lives were about to end. At that moment, another trap exploded, as the old man realized a huge monster was causing their alarm, so they decided to ignore it. However, the monster was nothing but a group of Yugi's slimes, and Yugi had found a medium-level spell to hide his powers. When the girls saw Yugi's slimes, he transferred his ice spell to them, surrounding them with a dome of ice that completely enveloped their camp, making them realize he was much stronger than expected. After he took them to safety, Lisa wondered if he had cast it, but Yugi told them an ice dragon must have saved their lives because he was too weak to cast any spells. At that moment, a purple fog began covering the sky, but as they were about to return, Yugi revealed he would scout the area before launching his slimes toward the sky to explore the entire forest. When the golems found a good spot, Tina and Lisa wondered what they were seeing, especially when they saw the golems lighting the campfire and setting up their tents. Not long after, the 2 girls were asleep, and Yugi remembered the old man's prophecy about the sacrificial calamity that would result from the blue moon. The next day, as they continued their search for the Earth Dragon, Yugi decided to hide his true powers to appear normal, and performed a specific magic spell, where he threw rocks at a wolf to test his magic. But when the golems started destroying all the monsters in front of them, the sky turned purple, and a light descended towards the earth, destroying the forest with a large explosion, while a blue dragon appeared in the sky. When Yugi noticed the monster, he warned the girls it was right behind them, and they started running towards the mountains. However, Fenrir and the golems had already gotten ahead of them and defeated all the monsters in the area, so when they arrived, they found everything killed, and the girls wondered how Yugi managed to control so many powerful golems. At that moment, the ground began to open up, and the Earth Dragon appeared before their eyes. At that moment, Yugi realized it had been hiding underground all this time, and with the girls scared, they decided to hide behind a rock, but Yugi told them he would kill the monster. Just as he started heading towards it, he cast a spell, and his golems launched rocks at the dragon. However, it wasn't harmed, so another golem started throwing fire at it, but the girls realized there was no damage to the dragon. Yugi decided to increase his magic, but when the dragon launched rocks at the girls, the smaller golems launched rocks to deflect them. As the dragon grew angrier, it started rolling towards Yugi, but Yugi avoided being crushed and started using his golems to launch rocks simultaneously. Yet the dragon remained unharmed and began charging at him until a massive whirlwind of rocks surged forward. When Yuji activated a lighting spell, saw the dragon in front of him, and unleashed his blazing fire, burning the dragon in flames until only its head remained. That night, when they arrived at the guild, Ruby was shocked to discover they had killed the earth dragon. The golems spat out the head as their prize. She paid them 10 gold pieces, but the head knight told Yuji they needed to talk at the meeting. Ken began by saying that the blue dragon had appeared as prophesied, but Yuji hated these meetings in his past life. Ken asked Yuji to describe the earth dragon he fought. With Yuji discovering the skill of depiction, he drew a picture of the dragon on his paper. Throughout human history, only one person possessed this skill, so the priest revealed the Book of Legends. According to it, the dragon only appeared once under a dark sky in 3 days before it wiped out an entire continent. When Ken wondered how it was defeated, the priest revealed it was killed by a royal emissary who had the power of kings 30 years ago during a solar eclipse, where a spirit summoning ritual was performed in the capital cathedral to summon a hero 30 years from the future to save their world from calamity. However, the priest believed the ritual had failed, as the dragon appeared exactly 30 years after it was performed. At that moment, the sky turned purple, and Yuji's golem told him the dragon was growing in size. When Yuji revealed this to the men, they realized their world might be destroyed in 3 days. Ken thought the only option was to attack the dragon the next day. Later in the cafeteria, Yuji noticed the priest and wondered why he was staring at him like a child. So that night, the priest introduced himself as Sakatamin and revealed an ancient dagger he had brought from the capital. When he gave it to Yuji, the system revealed it was an unbreakable dagger from K's and told him it focused on magical effects. The priest said he was giving it to Yuji as a gift and bestowed upon him the title of Royal Emissary. That night, as Yuji wondered how they would fight the dragon, his golem told him it had started growing to an enormous size. Realizing it would be much stronger tomorrow, he remembered the instructions he was given, that his magic was extraordinary. But when Yuji wondered if this meant his magic was weak, the master said it was extremely powerful, so he realized he was born to save this world. That night, he set off into the forest with his followers and soon confronted the dragon. As he was ready to destroy it, he activated the flames of annihilation, and his golem unleashed a flame that erupted in an explosion. However, the monster was unharmed, and when it became enraged, it unleashed an explosion across the entire forest, destroying even the cliff. When it was over, Yuji was unharmed, protected by his shield. However, he soon realized that the dragon was absorbing energy from the forest and its size was increasing, so Yuji revealed his dagger, realizing his only chance was to kill it, and he thought he could focus his flames of annihilation into the blade. At that moment, he started charging with his followers, and when the dragon unleashed an explosion, he activated a shield and landed without getting burned. And as he started charging again, the monster was preparing to unleash another explosion, but he threw a golem towards the dragon and activated a barrier to block the attack. Realizing his chance, he drew his dagger, and when he activated a jump spell, he started leaping higher and higher towards the dragon. However, when the monster tried to destroy him, Yuji unleashed a fireball and stabbed it in the eye, releasing his flames of annihilation into its body, causing it to fall to the ground. Just when he thought it was dead, it swatted him away with its tail. Luckily for Yuji, he managed to activate his shield, but he realized he was running low on magic points. At that moment, the dragon soared high and prepared to unleash a massive explosion, but Yuji created a series of shields to protect himself while the dragon unleashed its energy blast. Yuji wondered how he could pull it back to the ground and quickly realized that the shield protecting him was weakening. At that moment, he noticed the royal strike ability and raised his hand, unleashing a terrible blast at the dragon, causing it to fall to the ground. Hoping to seize this opportunity, he mounted the wolf and they began charging towards the monster, while Yuji stabbed its neck, cut it with blazing fire, and successfully severed its head, causing it to explode into red cells before fading away. After eliminating the dragon, Yuji decided to head towards the city. The next day when Ken appeared, he told him that the purple sky had cleared and wondered who had managed to defeat the dragon. However, he suspected Yuji might have done it and thanked him for his help. In the cafeteria, Tina started telling Yuji that they would be recognized as national heroes for agreeing to fight the dragon, even though they hadn't done anything. Hearing her words, Yuji thought they were a useless duo and wondered how they managed to survive in the forests. While Lisa wondered what he planned to do next, Yuji revealed he had no idea where to go. Lisa suggested he head to Ricardo, a city on the western side of the forest, saying it offered the best food in the world, unlike their useless city. That evening, as Yuji started to leave, they bid him farewell, wishing him survival on his own, but he left a golem to watch over them. As they started traveling through the forest, the creature from the forest appeared on the system and summoned Yuji upon his arrival, revealing that special mushrooms had started growing where the dragon was killed, and said she needed his help to make a special potion. While he tried to ask why she appeared from a tree, she explained that she could make a sage potion with red mushrooms and produce minor stimulants with blue mushrooms. When Yuji wondered what the blue mushrooms did, the creature told him they revived magical powers, but she discovered the potion was an unusual color and reported there was something wrong with the mushrooms. She said they might have packed too much magical power, but she hoped she could fix the remaining mushrooms with some clear water. Yuji decided to help her, so he created a barrier with his special technique and told her to boil some water until it was clear. At that moment, the creature remembered the first time they met. He found her unconscious on a tree and revived her with magic. When he told her he had transferred some of his magic to her, he asked her to tell him what happened. She told him that her power had been depleted by a magic stone and that she couldn't leave the forest. Immediately, Yuji activated a dispelling spell and turned the stone into a rock. At that moment, monsters tried to emerge from it, but he activated an anti-magic barrier and unleashed blazing fire to annihilate them until they disappeared. The creature, Dread, summoned several flowers from the tree roots, saying she owed him her life. While Yuji wondered why the potion looked like magic stones, Dread revealed it had merged with dragon dust, a special magical power only found where a dragon dies. This special power makes the mushroom sprout, and she told him that dragon dust could be used for good and evil. She said it could heal all kinds of wounds and even summon any type of monster. Just as the golem finished purifying the water, Dread mixed it with the potion, and it immediately turned blue. She thanked Yuji for his help after realizing the potion would benefit them, and a few minutes later, she gave him some sage potions and minor stimulants as requested, saying she would return to the forest, and vanished before his eyes. As they continued their journey, Yuji realized fog was covering their path. So the wolf revealed that some humans were nearby and started tracking the scent towards a new road. A short while later, they arrived at an old village and wondered if this was Ricardo. As Yuji tried to look around, he noticed the villagers staring at him and thought their strange smiles were as disgusting as their huts. Then the village chief appeared before him and wondered how he found his way there, but Yuji said it was a coincidence, so he decided to invite him to a meal, saying he wished to satisfy him for his journey. However, when Yuji saw the disgusting food, he told him he wasn't hungry, realizing the food was probably from the trash. While the chief wondered if he had a reason to enter the village, Yuji revealed he was heading to Ricardo before he took a wrong turn. Then he noticed the suspicious villagers staring at him from the window, and when the chief tried to say they were surprised by a visitor, Yuji started to leave after feeling suspicious of the villagers. As they continued through the forest, Yuji thought they would soon reach Ricardo. However, when they emerged from the forest, they found themselves in a blizzard and wondered if they were in a different world. So as they continued through the cold, Yuji decided to activate an isolation barrier to get some warmth. After several hours, they finally reached Ricardo, and the guards told him the blizzard had mysteriously started days ago. When they asked why he came, he revealed he was there for food. Inside the city, he tried to find a restaurant but realized the streets were deserted and even the water was frozen. When he finally reached a restaurant, the lady told him they were closed for the day and were more worried about staying warm than preparing food. And while Yuji thought the food must be delicious, he wondered if the only thing they needed was firewood, but Lily told him that finding it was rarer than her father who left her. However, Yuji ignored her frustration because he really wanted to eat, so he headed into the forest hoping to get some firewood. He summoned an axe, and with knowledge of martial arts, cut down 10 trees with one strike. In a few minutes, he had cut them into logs, and when he activated the slime's moisture absorption skill, the slime had warmed all the logs until they were dry. He returned to the restaurant like any desperate person, and Lily asked why his wood was so small. Yet, Yuji said her ugly face was why her father left her. She then asked if she could cook with it, so she quickly went to find the chef. When she arrived, he said the wood was too dry and would burn the whole place down if they tried to cook with it. Before they knew it, Yuji cast a slime moistening spell and offered it to the chef, who then realized it was exactly what they needed. When they lit the stove, he promised to prepare a special meal for Yuji, and his words were the best news Yuji had ever heard. So he ordered the slime to dump the remaining logs, and they unloaded them into a large pile. When Yuji activated the slime's moistening, the slime warmed the logs. At that moment, his stomach rumbled, so the chief decided to prepare a meal for him because of his hard work. Shortly after, he was served roasted beef, and the taste sent Yuji straight to an angelic realm. When he finished, he thanked them for the food, but the chef told him this wasn't even close to their best dishes. Excited by the idea, Yuji wondered how that was possible, and promised to return the next day to taste the food. However, Lily started telling him they couldn't use all the firewood because the entire town had no wood to warm their homes. At that moment, Yuji thought this was his chance to impress her and declared he would return, unlike her father, vowing to come back with more wood. Soon after, he arrived at the Adventurers Guild and found that the only thing on their lists was firewood. When he offered to take the easy quest, the manager told him to meet the firewood leader for instructions. When the wood trainer, Woodka, looked at his id, he welcomed him, saying they could barely meet the town's needs to deliver 5 tons of firewood daily. He told him their village alone was facing the blizzard, and that the previous village he passed was always abandoned. Yuji thought he was definitely mysterious and decided to start his work, while Woodka began saying he looked thin and pretty useless for doing anything. Yuji cut several trees with one strike, and in an instant, he started chopping them into logs and stacking them in a pile. At that moment, his slime began heating them, and Woodka thought Yuji must definitely be an alien. By the end of the day, Yuji had prepared several piles of wood, enough to supply the entire town for a few days. Yet, he thought it wasn't enough, and went on a logging spree, cutting almost every tree in the forest and turning them into more wood. Thanks to his amazing work, he earned a lot of money from the guild, and even spent the night in a comfortable room. The next day at the restaurant, when a new meal was served, the flavor sent him to nirvana, and he felt like he was floating on clouds. However, the chef revealed it wasn't even his best dish, and Lily said the Risha herb used to cook their best meal was being devoured by monsters, and they couldn't make a new dish unless all the monsters disappeared. Without saying a word, Yuji started heading out, ready to eradicate all the monsters to taste that meal. After a while, he ordered his subordinates to check the forest for monsters, and when his slimes found a Bork monster, Yuji immediately activated a monster-burning spell. After a while, he noticed a mysterious stone, and when he decided to take a look at it, Dread told him she could sense magical traces from within. When Yuji touched it, they found it was absorbing his magic, and he said it was likely Dragon Graze, the powerful magic that creates cursed magic stones. Dread revealed that the stone was absorbing all the magic in the area, and Yuji thought the disappearance of magic must have caused the blizzard. Realizing it was the only way to stop the snow, Yuji cast an anti-magic barrier on the stone and expelled the curse, immediately turning it into a normal rock. Within a few hours, he expelled over 100 magic stones around the forest and learned about the areas by picturing them. Once they reached the center of the forest, he thought some huge trees were deliberately left untouched, and he said they were probably protecting a secret entrance. Then, he ordered Dread to retreat, and she asked what he intended to do. He told her he would burn all the trees in front of him, and she agreed with his plan, saying it was definitely the right thing to do. He unleashed blazing fire on the forest, burning all the trees in a huge explosion. In the center of the crater, they discovered a secret entrance, and Yuji stated he would definitely go underground to find out who the enemies were. When Yuji destroyed the entrance, he found a secret tunnel and descended into it. He quickly noticed a huge machine and realized he was inside a large factory. When he saw more machines, he wondered if the magic stones were created there. At that moment, two people entered, wondering why the machines had stopped working. They thought it might have been destroyed in the forest explosion, and rushed out to inform their leader. When Yuji reached a corridor, he realized he could be easily detected, so he cast an invisibility spell on his slime to make them unseen and continued alone. When he got back, the slime revealed it had found the men and tracked them through the path until they reached a dead end. Then, they noticed two levers, and Yuji thought they had to be pulled at the same time. As the slime pressed the two levers, the door opened at that moment. Shortly after, they discovered a ladder and realized the end of the factory was here, so they began climbing. At the same time, Yuji reached a slope and realized the spooky old village was before him. In the village, his slime began listening to mysterious men, and Yuji realized that useless people were pretending to be villagers to make magic stones underground. When leader Javier discovered that their well of curses had already been destroyed by an explosion, he began telling his men that their well of curses was destroyed and thought a meteor had fallen on it. With the factory completely destroyed, he said they had to retrieve all the magic stones and leave the village immediately. However, when one of the men thought they would be noticed moving through the forest, Javier told them to execute all witnesses they encountered because their plans were already ruined, and he believed the village was no longer useful as a cover. As the men headed out, Yuji ordered his slime to surround the village, thinking some innocent villagers might have been captured. However, they discovered the village was deserted, and the large group of imposters was all that remained. So when the slime headed to the library, Yuji told them to consume all the books, and they started devouring them like hungry mice. At the same time in the forest, Yuji noticed two useless strangers from the evil group, so he threw magic nets and successfully bound them. However, when they realized they had been discovered, they screamed like brainwashed recruits and began to attack themselves. At that moment, the slime found a sealed entrance, and Yuji realized it must be an important room, so he instructed the slime to stand in front of the candles and blow them out using a wind cutter. At that moment, the door opened, revealing a room full of treasures, and Yuji realized the useless men were probably selling all the magic stones for gold. Then one of the members arrived and discovered the treasure room had been completely emptied, and when the rest of the group realized that, they immediately discovered their other members had disappeared from the forest. At that moment, Javier revealed that their well of curses wasn't destroyed by a meteor after all, but by a new enemy. Fearing capture, one of the men wondered why they hadn't been attacked yet. Javier replied that the enemy probably realized their deaths would ignite a flame and destroy the whole world. However, Yuji was only now learning about this and realized that eliminating all of them wasn't an option after all. As Javier decided to propose a plan, he drew his dagger, saying destroying the world was the best thing to do. His useless disciples thought he was probably right and decided to draw their daggers. At the same time, they shouted a spell about purifying the world and stabbed themselves. At that moment, the purifying fire went out of control, and the ground began to shake. As Yuji realized it would soon explode, he covered his slime inside a barrier sphere and launched them from the village like a good father, determined to protect his children. Immediately, he activated a series of anti-magic barriers to contain the explosion. Then, a green flame erupted from the ground, erasing the entire village and starting to destroy the barrier. As Yuji realized the barrier wouldn't hold, he started looking for a strong barrier to contain the flame, but its walls began to crumble. At that moment, he discovered the perfect cover and created a combination of barriers in a complete isolation matrix. matrix. When he activated the magic, a dark shield covered the flame, but the strong winds nearly blew it away, and his magic points began to deplete as if in a countdown. However, the explosion only grew and almost destroyed even this barrier, but he managed to hold it until it exploded towards the sky and formed a huge cloud. With the world safe again, Yuji noticed his magic points were in the negative range and realized he was close to being sent to another dimension. And that night, when he arrived at the village, he found that people were waiting for him. When he wondered why they were up so late, Woodka told him they had noticed the huge explosion in the forest, and Lily commented that they were afraid he had been crushed by a meteor. Yuji told them he was happy to see the town safe, and Woodka reminded him that the meteor might have stopped the blizzard. At that moment, Yuji noticed the frozen water starting to melt, and by the next day, he realized the weather had become as warm as summer. When Woodka invited him to breakfast, he said they intended to celebrate the end of winter. So, inside the restaurant, Yuji found they were celebrating him as a guest of honor, and Woodka told him the townspeople were happy because he had provided them with firewood during the blizzard. Then, Lily appeared before his eyes and thanked him. So, with the monster dead, they were able to store the best Risha herbs, and shortly after, she presented him with a special meal to help him. When Yuji took a bite, the beautiful flavor gave him the strongest peak in his entire life, and they realized even Lily hadn't been able to make him reach a stronger peak. When he woke up that night, he decided to read the scrolls from the abandoned village, but the words disappeared before his eyes. However, one scroll stood out, and he realized it was a list of people the Blue Moon Rescue Group was trying to eliminate. Meanwhile, in a nearby city, 2 assassins wiped out a group of people, and a man named Yuki discovered Yuji's name was next on the list. So, after several days, they started spying on him from the mountain, wondering if he was a worthy target. However, Yuji already knew he was being spied on after noticing his name on the scroll. To protect Ricardo, he decided to leave immediately, and the girl who looked like Lily suggested Yuji head towards Panea. When he wondered why, she told him she would find him the best monster armor in the city, and thought it would be perfect for him. As Yuji continued walking towards the new city, he discovered he was being followed by assassins. During a short break, hoping to appear as a normal trainer, Yuki and a girl named Sona continued spying on him, wondering if his skills were extraordinary. When Yuki tried to suggest eliminating him in his sleep, Sona told him he was still just a potential target, and they would only eliminate him if they were sure he posed a threat. But she considered this situation worse than babysitting a preschooler. But Yuji heard every word they said and thought ending their lives would attract more attention to him, so he decided he had to convince them he was just a regular loser. When he arrived in Penia, the duo kept spying on him. Sona figured he had to be a strong trainer because he decided to buy armor from the best blacksmith in town, but Yoji pretended he didn't have money and got kicked out of the shop. At that moment, he bumped into someone on the street and started begging for his life like a useless loser before being rejected by a fruit vendor. The assassins thought he might be poor, and Yuki suggested they just give up on him when they noticed he was drinking a lot of grape juice. But Sona wasn't convinced yet, so Yoji decided to convince them he was truly a loser, so they'd finally leave him alone. Shortly after, he arrived at the guild and offered to take on a raging bull. When the assassins realized that, Yuki thought he was definitely a weak loser, but Sona said she wanted to see him in a fight. Quickly, Yoji reached the mountain and told his followers he wouldn't use any offensive magic during the mission. Wolf asked how he would protect himself, but Yoji decided to ditch the mission, telling him to do it alone. At that moment, a bull started attacking, but Wolf managed to fend it off and kill it immediately. As Wolf discovered his strength, his fur stood on end, ready for battle, and Yoji remembered the first time he saw him, trying to get out of the forest, but Wolf appeared before his eyes, craving his meat. However, when he tried to devour him, Yoji threw a magic net to restrain him, but when he noticed Wolf was sad, he decided to activate telepathy with monsters, and found Wolf begging for his life. He decided to let him go, and wondered if he'd be happy being empowered as his trainer, and Wolf agreed immediately. Then, Wolf vowed to defeat the bulls and finish the job in a flash. Seeing that, Yuki and Sona thought Yoji must be super strong because he managed to tame Wolf, and Sona wondered if he should really be eliminated. With Yoji desperate to convince them, he decided to heal the bulls, hoping they'd realize Wolf's attack was weak and useless. However, when the bulls attacked again, Wolf instantly wrecked them, but Yoji revived them once more. At this point, Wolf was already exhausted, and Yuki thought his teeth were even more useless. However, Wolf managed to motivate himself, so Yoji upgraded the bulls by increasing their power, and when Wolf realized he was about to be crushed, he started running for his life, and the rock cracked in front of him as Yoji realized his wolf was about to be defeated, trying to boost his power, but Wolf refused his help, determined to face the bulls without an upgrade, and when they started attacking again, they attacked back and eventually managed to defeat them. Suddenly, a bull started attacking him, but he summoned a sword and cut it down instantly, realizing he was exposed to the assassins. In shock, they wondered how he managed to summon the sword, but they just thought it was dumb luck and started leaving. That night in the forest, Sona started telling her leader through a crystal ball that Yoji was too useless to be a threat to their group, and vowed to take out their next target. However, when Yoji realized it was Priest Still who gave him the special dagger to kill the dragon, dragon, he figured it was dangerous to let them go, so he activated a magic spell to completely freeze the chamber. The next day, he returned to the armor shop and told the guy he wanted to buy monster armor, but the guy thought he was still poor and tried to kick him out again, saying the master only paid attention to the best customers. Then Gil appeared before them, yelling at him to get out of his head, and started saying Yoji was his strongest client ever, and that even his armor's defense stats were nothing compared to his super clay. He told him he had to make special armor for them, and when he noticed their aura, he revealed that clay was the most broken monster in human history. When Yoji wondered if they were hopeless about getting armor, Gil told him they'd make sure to find the right material for the armor in the lesser blue fire dragon gem. However, Gil said the blue dragon wasn't easy to kill, and he would definitely make special armor for his monsters if he could retrieve their gem. Just as Yoji was about to leave, he decided to ask if there were any adult fire dragons in the mountains, but even though Gil told him they existed, he revealed they were super rare. Realizing he might never find them, Yoji told him he would just try to find the lesser blue dragons. Shortly after, he arrived at the guild and told the lady he intended to complete all missions to eliminate the dragons in the mountains, but she thought his useless behavior had driven him crazy, since the missions were probably impossible. When he tried to tell her he'd destroy them with his magic, she revealed to him that magic wouldn't work on lesser fire dragons because they were protected by their gem's magic. Plus, their scales were super thick and couldn't be cut with a sword. When he asked how to kill them, the lady revealed they had to drown them with large amounts of water because fire dragons were naturally weak and could only survive on volcano heat. Realizing it was too easy, Yoji wondered why all the dragons hadn't been eliminated yet. The lady said it was hard to carry water up the mountain, and if they needed water, they had to cross a river full of predatory fish that devoured anyone trying to cross to the other side. Yoji realized he could eliminate many monsters at the same time and decided to accept this extra mission, but the girl thought he might need a checkup. A few hours later, upon reaching the mountains, Yoji realized the volcano was still active, so he wondered if it was safe to stay around the area. His clay decided to investigate, and Yoji quickly realized they had met their ancient relatives, and when he used his appraisal skill, he realized they were red clay, a different type of his own kind, and decided to tame them. Shortly after, they reached the river full of predatory fish, so Yoji activated the clay net, making all the clay intertwine and allowing them to go deep into the water. While the clay jumped into a hole, they quickly returned, chased by predatory fish, but he managed to catch them and pull them to the surface. Right before his eyes, the fish destroyed the net and tried to finish him off, but Yoji trapped them inside a mid-range freeze. But quickly, the fish destroyed the ice and tried to swallow him, but he escaped and burned it with a fireball until it turned into grilled tuna. When he finished, they started heading towards the mountains and noticed the lesser fire dragons. When he appeared before the first dragon, he fired a water cannon at the monster and successfully killed it right before his eyes. Heat emanated from the dragon, and the special gem fell from its body. Within a few minutes, Yoji killed many dragons and thought it was just a waste of time. At that moment, he saw an elder blue dragon and thought it was definitely a better choice. So through mental telepathy, he ordered his clay to surround the monster and fired water cannons from every direction hoping to drown it. However, it managed to survive the attack, and Yoji realized he needed to try different magic. In a flash, he froze it using mid-range freeze, but the dragon destroyed the ice. Realizing Yoji needed to increase his power, he ordered his clay to gather in front of the dragon and cast mid-range freeze again, but doubled in effect. At that moment, a block of ice covered the monster, and when it melted, the dragon died instantly. Only then, the special gem shattered from its body, and Yoji realized this would be the perfect armor. So when he returned to the guild, he submitted all missions, saying he had killed every lesser fire dragon in the mountains, and even the piranhas, to show off his skills. Yoji revealed that he managed to lure the fish to the surface before killing them, and the lady thought he must be from another world. That night, when Yoji arrived at the blacksmith shop, he decided to reveal the gem from the lesser blue fire dragon. Seeing that, Gil realized Yoji was more powerful than he thought, and Yoji wondered if he could make armor for Wolf, to which Gil said he could. Another blue gem for his clay's armor, but the men wondered how he managed to kill 2 lesser blue fire dragons. Then his clay breathed out all the gems from the other 2 dragons, and Gil knew Yoji was definitely not from this world. By the next day, Gil made armor for Wolf and Clay. To test the new upgrade, Wolf started running through the mountains and was even faster than the breeze. And when it was Clay's turn, it started moving around the mountains, and Yoji thought it looked almost invisible. To test the full power of their armor, he decided to boost their abilities with his magic, increasing their speed to be close to a flash of light, as Gil suggested. And when Yoji tried to test their attack power, he decided to cast mid-range ice magic on the mountain, covering everything with ice. Gil was in shock, wondering how Yoji became so strong, but Yoji told him to shut his mouth, which wasn't worth anything with his weird hairstyle. Later at the shop, Gil Gil started telling Yoji that blue gems could only hold a little magic and would be destroyed if he tried to increase their magical powers. When Yoji wondered if there was a stronger gem that could contain all his powers, Gil told him that only a fire dragon gem could do the job, but he said it could never be defeated. When Yoji wondered why, Gil started telling him that the fire dragon lived deep inside the volcano and only came out on rare occasions. Later in the room, as Yoji remembered Gil's words, he wondered if the volcano would explode after he killed the fire dragon and thought it was better to abandon his plan. At that moment, he discovered hundreds of dragons appeared on the mountains and thought the blue moon of salvation might have attracted the monsters. So he ordered his followers to head towards the volcano, wondering if any weird guys could be seen nearby. At that moment, they noticed a couple of men climbing the mountain, and Yoji quickly realized the volcano was erupting before his eyes. The fire dragon came out, and his followers realized the weird guys were heading towards the volcano. The first man, Goro, wondered what they'd do if their plan failed. The chubby guy told him they were men from the nearby city of Ardian and had promised the plan would definitely succeed. Hearing their words, Yoji realized they were definitely members of the Blue Moon of Salvation and activated a magic net to catch them, but their reaction was quick, and they dodged it. Seeing this, Yoji thought they were pros after all, but the men wondered if the net was just a mountain trap. As they continued their way towards the volcano, Yoji tried to throw another net from behind, but they dodged it, and Goro threw his sword into the invisible clay. However, Yoji was smart and finally restrained them from behind as soon as the clay started appearing in front of them. The men realized their plans had failed and decided to take a pill that would let them teleport. Then Yoji ordered his clay to check the barrels, and they discovered they were full of water. After a while, Drad appeared on the mountains to observe the water and revealed it was full of evil magic to provoke the fire dragon. Unwilling to take chances, Yoji activated a nullification curse and purified the water at that moment. With the threat gone, Drad vanished from the mountains, and Yoji thought it was over. However, the dragon started screaming, and a man appeared at Yoji's door to tell him to leave the city before the rain started. At that moment, the rain started again, and the fire dragon's wrath increased, as Yoji realized something was definitely wrong. He remembered the man mentioning that the dragon always caused chaos whenever it awoke in the rain. At that moment, the dragon started heading towards the city, aiming to repeat history, but the city residents began evacuating. When the fire dragon reached the river, Yugi wondered if it would be afraid to cross, but its body heat killed all the fish. Yugi realized this monster couldn't be stopped. With no other choice, Yugi knew he had to be the one to defeat the dragon. When the wolf appeared before the fire dragon, Yugi cast a mid-range ice spell to trap its foot, but it broke the ice. However, Yugi wouldn't back down, so he trapped its head with another mid-range ice spell, but it shattered instantly. The dragon prepared its own attack, but Yugi countered it with another mid-range ice spell. However, the dragon soon reached another river, and Yugi thought this was his perfect chance to end it. At that moment, a large barrier full of water exploded, and when it burst, the flood swept the dragon away. Yugi revealed he had prepared this as a backup plan. However, the dragon reappeared and launched a terrible blast at Yugi's followers, but Yugi managed to protect them with a barrier. As the dragon began preparing a more powerful attack that would wipe out the entire city, Yugi activated the permanent ice curse. At that moment, he unleashed a powerful breath of ice against the flames, overpowering the fire and freezing the dragon, which then shattered into pieces. The rain stopped, and when Yugi noticed the large fire dragon gem, the clay figures revealed a strange device they had found on the mountains. That night, when Yugi returned to the blacksmith shop, he told Gil he had found a rare dragon gem. When Gil realized it might be from the fire dragon, he promised to make him special armor. Later at the guild, Yugi decided to ask the manager if she had visited Arian. She told him she had, and said it was a favorite spot for adventurers escaping taxes. At that moment, the clay figures tossed the device, and Yugi wondered if she knew what it was. She told him it was one of the guild's artificial rain machines, often used during droughts to attract rain. She said every city had its own rain summoning machine, but she noticed the name on this one had been scratched off. As Yugi remembered the men's words, he wondered why they were trying to destroy the city and wished he could eliminate them. The next morning, when Yugi picked up his armor, Gil tried to ask his name, and he told him it was G. When he arrived at the Adventurers Guild, he found he was being watched. The men wondered why he hadn't chosen any new quests. However, when they entered a private room, Yugi discovered they were members of the Blue Moon of Salvation and intended to eliminate him, seeing him as a threat. However, they were afraid their attack would draw everyone's attention to their secret group, and they thought it would cancel their plans to destroy the world. At that moment, Father Style and his assistant appeared before Yugi, but he wondered how they found him. They soon began talking at the church, where Father Style told him he had been brought there by a vision and expressed his hope of seeing Yugi again. As Yugi wondered why the members of the Blue Moon of Salvation were trying to kill him, Father Style decided to tell him his story. Many years ago, he was the leader of the Blue Moon Church, a notorious church group that sought revenge for their fallen comrades in various cities. Over time, they began to expand with new followers. The leader of the Blue Moon of Salvation was one of his followers, and at that time, time, he thought he might have been too enthusiastic for his cause. Before he realized it, Walter began to act beyond control with his ambitions and started creating his own secret group. So, one day, Lord warned him of the Blue Moon Church's destruction, but he chose to ignore the vision because he was afraid of losing all his comrades. However, a few days later, they were all killed, and he barely escaped with his life. The attack was an attempt to seize the growing church, and it was revealed that Walter was the one who led this attack. So, with the church destroyed, he managed to brainwash his followers into believing the world needed cleansing and created the secret group, the Blue Moon of Salvation. Father Style admitted he felt guilty for starting the church in the first place, and that he had come to warn Yugi before it was too late. He said his new vision was likely a warning that the Blue Moon of Salvation must be destroyed, and he began reading words from the vision as guidance. He said Walter was a corrupted light leading the world to chaos and could only be confronted by one royal emissary. He said Keith's dagger was enough to prove Yugi was the emissary. That night in his room, Yugi began to wonder how he could be the emissary, as he realized he only possessed the dagger because the priest had given it to him. As he wondered about their legends, he thought it would be best to ask the priest himself. However, when he arrived at the church the next day, a man told him the priest had already left. As Yugi began to leave the city, hoping to find him, he decided to ask his clay figures for help, and soon discovered the priest had ventured deep into the forest, so he went to look for him. Meanwhile, in the forest, Father Style and his assistant Johann reached a secret tree. He cast a spell on the darkness before him, which opened the entrance, and they went inside. On the other hand, Yugi managed to tame more clay figures, and had the ability to detect the priest's location inside the tree, while Father Style and Johann began to move. As they approached the ancient temple, some members of the Blue Moon of Salvation were preparing to attack him, but he cast an anti-magic shield on himself and Johann, ready to fight. Inside the forest, Yugi and his companions discovered the secret tree. He cast a curse dispel spell to permanently destroy the darkness, revealing the entrance. When they entered, they found that Father Style had killed all the men, and Yugi realized he was still a danger. Meanwhile, Father Style and Johann finally entered the temple and saw Walter before them. The priest began talking about how his vision led him here, and that he wanted to know what it meant. Walter told him it was his end, and that his men were ready to do their duty. However, the priest threw one of them away, and began a series of offensive moves that brought them to their knees. But Walter was unaffected, as he had already prepared a new plan. Before the priest realized it, he was bound by a magic rope and electrocuted. At that moment, when he discovered Johann belonged to the Blue Moon of Salvation, he realized he had been tricked. At that moment, Walter began telling him that he had been waiting to eliminate Yugi ever since he discovered Yugi was thwarting his plans to destroy the world. However, when they realized Yugi was much stronger than they imagined, they thought the priest was surely responsible, and Johann accused him of giving Yugi the dagger. Nevertheless, Yugi continued to sabotage all their plans, captured their best men, and killed the fire dragon they had hoped would destroy several villages. But Walter was sure his plans would succeed this time, and he indicated his intention to create a new world. While Father Style tried to say he wasn't afraid of entering Nirvana, Walter decided to awaken his followers as zombie spirits, stating that they were all cursed. At that moment, the wall exploded, and Yugi appeared before their eyes, saying he had come to ask the priest some questions. Fearing their plans would be thwarted again, Johann launched a fireball at him, but Yugi blocked it with a shield and cast a spell to free the priest. At that moment, Walter realized Yugi was the emissary, and decided to awaken all his zombie followers. As the zombies tried to finish them off, Yugi cast a spell, and his golems launched a fireball that pushed them away. But Walter took advantage of the distraction and left for the secret lab inside. Walter sat on a device and revealed that this was the source of their power. At that moment, the dragon Grace pierced his body, but Yugi sent the last zombie flying inside. When the zombies appeared before him, wondering if he intended to become the next Frankenstein, he began transforming before their eyes. Yugi realized he might become a threat, so he launched a fireball at him, but he emerged from the flames and tried to strike him, only to be saved by the wolf. At that moment, the monster unfurled its wings and grew in size, even growing a tail as it prepared to unleash a blast. Yugi cast an anti-magic shield and deflected it instantly. The monster appeared before the shield, but when Yugi launched a fireball, it vanished instantly, moving around the cave. Yugi realized it was fast. However, he decided to continue his attacks and launched a barrage of fireballs at the zombies, but the monster managed to dodge them. Nevertheless, Yugi wouldn't back down, and his clay figures began launching more fireballs before finally destroying it with a barrage of flames. However, the monster remained unharmed, so Yugi decided to try a new attack. He flung his golem towards the monster. The monster tried to fire at it, but Yugi cast a magic shield, allowing his men to prepare their shields. Immediately, he activated a power boost, and the wolf began to rush like a flash of light until it appeared before the monster. At that moment, Yugi launched a huge fireball that burned the monster, sending it crashing to the ground. However, the monster managed to survive and absorbed dragon grace from a zombie, regenerating instantly. As it flew toward Yugi, it summoned a giant fireball that burned his arm, but it absorbed more zombies and grew 2 additional arms. Just as Yugi realized it was ascending to the level of dragon grace, the monster appeared before his eyes, but he burned it with a fireball, and all of Yugi's clay figures continued to unleash flames on it. However, the monster kept regenerating, saying it was practically unkillable. But Yugi soon discovered a new plan and barely escaped being crushed as the monster tried to chase him. Yugi threw a fireball. However, the monster continued to absorb zombies and regenerate its body, but Yugi cast a Curse Dispel spell, turning the monster's feet to stone. Angered by this, the monster appeared before Yugi, ready to finish him, but he cast a magic shield, allowing his shield to face the attack. However, as the shield began to crack, the monster punched him away, but Yugi restrained it with a magic net. As his clay figures gathered, Yugi cast several magic nets, binding the monster. At that moment, as Yugi was ready to finish it off, he summoned blazing fire of destruction and engulfed it in great flames. However, even in defeat, Walter believed his plan was still successful and summoned the royal emissary residing within the machine. At that moment, the machine awakened and began to absorb all the magical energy surrounding the caves into a bright light. At that moment, a new light descended into the cave, revealing a new enemy who called himself the Sage. When Yugi questioned his identity, Father Style revealed that he might be the Sage Yugi saw in his visions. According to legends, the Sage was their emissary but was defeated by a powerful dragon in his previous life. This time, Walter's plan was to revive him with his own life. In the same way, Yugi was summoned through spirit summoning rituals. Upon hearing these words, Yugi wondered if the Sage was the king who gave him the vision, but Father Style said he was an evil demon who must be destroyed immediately. At that moment, the Sage unleashed blazing fire of destruction, but Yugi summoned a shield in time, and the fire destroyed the entire area while the Sage ascended into the sky. Yugi wondered how he could cast blazing fire of destruction and thought he was definitely powerful. He decided to eliminate him, so he activated a buff for his followers, and his wolf began to leap towards the Sage. He cast anti-magic shields as support, allowing him to fly towards the sky. When he appeared before the Sage, he tried to throw a fireball, but the Sage prepared an attack shield. While the blazing fire of destruction was unleashed, the wolf narrowly dodged it as the clay figures spread out. Yugi cast physical anti-shields as support. As they ascended, the clay figures began firing a barrage of fireballs, but the Sage repelled all attacks. When the clay figures tried to distract him, the Sage unleashed massive fire, but Yugi made them invisible while the fires erupted in an explosion. At that moment, another clay figure tried to surprise him and launched a fireball, but the Sage blocked it with a shield. When Yugi noticed he was starting to lose mana points, he wondered how the Sage had the ability to keep casting blazing fire of destruction without losing mana. He thought the Sage's mana points might be infinite, and ordered his clay figures to gather above him. When the clay figures jumped towards the Sage, Yugi activated remote ice magic and doubled the attack, but the Sage cast a shield before he could be frozen, and the ice began to crack, causing it to shatter into pieces. However, the clay figures were ready to attack again and began using the ice as steps to approach. When they got close enough, Yugi cast a spell and launched a massive fireball, almost the size of the sun, which finally brought down the Sage. However, he remained unharmed and unleashed blazing fire of destruction that was 10 times more powerful than usual. So, Yugi activated the same spell, and the monstrous flames collided, burning horribly like blazing fire, until Yugi's flames triumphed. However, he discovered that he had consumed a lot of mana points, but he noticed that the Sage was unharmed, and at that moment, the Sage raised his hand, and purple rays of light descended from the sky before dissipating into their world. At that moment, cursed machines awoke, and Grace the dragon began to spread into the clouds while the sky began to rain. Cursed magic pulled all the monsters, and Yugi realized the cities were in danger. Inside the forest, while a monster was killed, Gale and his companions realized that all the monsters were out of control. They thought this was very strange, so Gale suggested returning to the city, and as they fled, monsters pursued them. But Yugi cast a spell, and his clay figures destroyed the pursuing monsters with fireballs. At that moment, the Sage began to ascend into the sky, and revealed that he was once a savior of this world before being killed by a powerful dragon. His failure to save the world filled him with regret, and he believed it was better for him to destroy the universe before another powerful dragon could emerge. Upon hearing these words, Yugi believed that the Sage was definitely the dragon that needed to be killed, and wondered if he was the chosen one to kill him. At that moment, the Sage activated a spell and unleashed blazing fire of destruction on him, as Yugi realized his shield would soon break, so he decided to retaliate, and they began casting fire spells, leading to explosions in the sky. At that moment, the clay figures warned Yugi that monsters were heading towards the cities, and their numbers might give people no chance to resist them. As Yugi was desperate to protect them, he activated a spell and burned the monsters with fireballs fireballs, but the sage thought he was very weak, and he wanted to say so. He couldn't protect everyone, but Yugi continued to destroy all monsters, ignoring his declining mana points at the same time, as Drad told him that the townspeople were preparing to face the monsters, and Gale tried to rally men under Yugi's command. A clay figure clung to him as a backup magical tool, and he discovered that all other cities were starting to prepare for battle, hoping to show him their support. At that moment, Yugi realized he had probably harmed himself in his previous life because he believed everyone was worthless, and he didn't need their help. He thought that cooperation wasn't a bad idea after all, and decided to boost the townspeople with attack and defense magic. At that moment, their power increased, and they began to eliminate all monsters in the forests. And when the monsters were dealt with, Yugi thought it was time to confront the sage again, but Father Style began to reveal that he had a new vision about a royal reign delivered by the sun and moon. Then Yugi decided to drink a magic potion to restore his magical powers. Immediately, a glowing light surrounded him, and he realized his magic points and health had been restored, ready for battle. He activated a jump spell and a physical barrier, continuing to cast spells until he reached a sufficient height to face the sage. When the sage wondered why he was determined to protect this world, memories began to flood his mind, and he told the sage that he loved this world just as it was. Realizing he couldn't be convinced, the sage prepared to unleash destructive blazing fire and created a series of explosions. However, when he tried to unleash blazing fire of destruction, Yugi unleashed his own power, leading to other explosions. When a royal strike appeared on the system, Yugi realized it was the same skill that weakened the dragon and wondered if it was the power Father Style told him about. He raised his hand and unleashed the royal strike on him, causing him to fall. When he realized he could use the skill again, he raised his hand and summoned lightning, realizing it actually worked. Yugi continued to summon lightning as if his life depended on it, and succeeded in weakening the sage. However, when he realized the sage was still alive, Yugi drew his dagger. At this time, the sage prepared massive energy explosions, but Yugi threw his dagger and unleashed the royal strike on him. This combination resulted in an eclipse, and Father Style believed his vision was beginning to come true. And when Yugi appeared with the dagger, the sage bombarded the ground, hoping to destroy the entire world, but Yugi managed to trap them both inside barriers that were 6 times stronger than normal barriers. But as soon as the barriers began to crack, Yugi sealed the area with complete isolation, and they rose from the ground. The sage wondered how the barriers remained so sturdy, but Yugi told him his question was irrelevant, and stabbed the sage with the dagger. Upon activating the special magic, his body began to crack, and the barriers exploded with a powerful light, allowing Yugi to descend with a golden aura. Upon seeing this, the townspeople wondered if he was an angel, but he fell from exhaustion and was happy that his barrier spell saved him from crashing. That evening, as Yugi began to leave the city, he wondered if everyone was safe, so Drad revealed that they were celebrating their victory against the monsters, and he was happy that they were all at peace. The next night, Yugi began spying on another group of Blue Moon of Salvation members, where the leader started saying that the purification device, a more powerful dragon machine, was nearing completion. He revealed that they would destroy the entire world with this machine, and said this was the only way to defeat the Black Dragon of Destruction, and it would purify their polluted world forever. When Yugi heard these words through his clay figures, he wondered what they meant and wished he could finish them all off at once. At that moment, his clay figures warned him of a monster approaching them, and a giant tiger appeared before his eyes. Realizing there were several other monsters lurking in the dark, he wondered how much he could earn from them at the guild. So, the next day, when he arrived at the Adventurers Guild, he decided to claim the reward for killing the tiger. Upon seeing him, the lady in charge of the guild asked about the rest of his team, saying that he certainly couldn't have killed it alone. When Yugi tried to say he did it alone, she thought he had hit his head and was suffering from shock. Then, a lady appeared and told Lily that Yugi had killed the tiger, and when she started examining him, she realized that Yugi was the legendary monster trainer who was prophesied to have the power to end the entire world. And at that moment, everyone started noticing him, realizing he was the legendary hero who saved their world from destruction. However, Yugi was already tired of dealing with all those things and wished he could just eat himself again by jumping from the abyss. Watch the next video. Until next time, O Masters of Legendary Tales.